Okay, we're going to talk about protesting now, but I don't want this conversation to sound to you, our listener, like, woe is me. We believe that we can all be better to each other.
I think it is criminal that we have to qualify it like that.
But
because there are people that will hear this and very apathetically, their minds will go right to, woe is me.
they're always complaining. Yeah.
I
And
didn't mean to cut you off.
no. I think that's the perfect way to kind of segue, because they're always complaining is often the attitude adopted by people who want nothing to do with it. What is this? What is the saying that we hear so often? I'm paraphrasing. I don't know if this is exactly it, but to the privileged, equality feels like oppression. And I believe it's something like that. Mm-hmm. And so voicing our concerns, or complaining, as this imaginary person might call it, is perhaps annoying, right? And so they want what they get often from the media, which is what we're talking about today when it comes to protesting, which is basically an amplified version of complaining. So I appreciate you setting me up for the segue here. Protesting while Black. Now, Q and I were on another radio show called The Beat Locker with a good friend of ours. Shout out to Poker Face. This was a recent interview that we did, and we were asked about the origin story for this show here, Civic Cypher. And for those that don't know the origin story, this show was based out of the protests of 2020. Q and I would show up to the protests for obvious reasons. But also at the time, Q and I were radio personalities on a hip hop station. I guess we're on way more hip hop stations now, but this was our occupation. We were DJs, radio personalities. This was kind of what we did. We were in nightclubs and we talked on the radio, right? So being out there, we felt like, hey, we should probably capture some of this magic, some of these narratives, some of these conversations, and put it on the radio so that we can combat the narrative that is being chronicled by the news outlets saying that we're out rioting. Mm-hmm. These are not riots, as illustrated by the fact that we are here with our children. And indeed, many of our allies are here with their children as well. There's no riots, there's no smoke, there's no burning, none of this sort of stuff, right? But we would go home at the end of the day and watch the news, and we would see that it was reported that there were riots. And it's like, well, that didn't happen where we were.
Overtly slanted.
Yeah.
Negative, kind of violent, inciting
exactly.
reporting.
So what would happen is police would end up cornering certain activists, and they were targeted because they had the facial recognition stuff. And we're talking about our city in Phoenix. You feel free to check this out because they've had to come out and admit all this stuff. But they had facial recognition things that they set up on different corners. I have a couple of businesses downtown, so I was down there every day. This was happening. So I saw all this stuff. They had the sound cannons and all the police presence and all that sort of stuff. They were targeting specific folks. I suspect they weren't targeting me and you because of our higher profile and our capacity to.
I mean, I don't know, because our profiles are a lot higher now.
Now, yeah.
I think they weren't targeting us because the proximity to our children made us move very, very carefully in those spaces.
Perhaps that was it. But I know for a fact
we
that
stayed out of the way.
Right. But I know for a fact that at least my name was on those people's radar for being there. Again, no crimes, nothing like that.
Well, again, sometimes when you're there and you look like you, there's the crime.
Go ahead and say it. So we're telling our story. We're describing what's going on. And then the narrative that we're seeing on the news is that it's criminal activity. The police were picking off protesters here and there. They'd turn a wrong corner or be going to their car or whatever. And then the police would swoop in. Other folks would see it and try to go and help and protect, because again, you got to understand the climate of the country at that time. You see police running after someone black, immediately you're like, oh my God, the worst could happen. This happened to us when we were pulled over in Mississippi. People were crying because they were fearing the worst about what could have happened to us based on what they were seeing our interaction with the police. Now, parts of those clips were being shared, and then it was, like you said, they were kind of skewing the conversation in such a way to suggest that the protests were unsafe, that the police and the protesters were fighting somehow, which isn't true. The police have guns. Protesters have bullhorns. It's not the same. You know what I mean? But this is kind of what helps the media keep the viewership of the people who really want it to be true, that Black people are always complaining, and that, you know, the people that have the privilege, to whom equality feels like oppression. Go ahead.
You know, the really interesting thing is, even for those who are the most cynical of our position and really, really feel like, you know, like, again, woe is me and you guys are always complaining, how our law enforcement responds is very, very telling. You know, so the people are probably wondering about the wild Black part, especially considering so many of the protesters here were not Black, except the cause they were standing for
was real Black,
very Black.
Yeah.
And therein lies the difference. Even, quote unquote, their own are treated the way that we're treated if you're standing up for us.
Yeah.
And the largest example was January 6th. Because prior to that, when the idea was Black Lives Matter protesters will be present, the police militarized themselves, tanks, riot gear, and came out in
facial recognition.
And came out in mass. I'm not even talking about the technology. I'm talking about the physical presence.
Yeah, they had the big guns,
big guns, and full tactical gear.
They look like soldiers
to make sure we didn't show up and harm any property.
Yeah.
January 6th, a date that they were made privy was coming. They were told, we're going to go, not just show up, we're going to go take over.
Yeah.
And they were conspicuously absent because white supremacy has a very hard time checking white supremacy. A very hard time.
Dang, that's a bar. All right, let me give you this. So we're talking about riots. We're talking about protesting that are described as riots and then fed to the masses. And these things help shape public opinion. And this is what leads to stereotypes. Okay. Dr. King, he's known for his nonviolent, peaceful protests, his marches, right? He's known for that now. He is not known for that when he was doing
he was known for it, then he just wasn't celebrated for it.
Okay, that's a good way to say it. However,
he was infamous for his marches and his speeches when he was alive.
So watch this. There would be, let's say he did 5 marches. There might be a skirmish between the protesters and the police at 2 of them. And in our estimation, it was probably provoked by the police.
Okay.
But that's all that's necessary for...
This time I do mean to cut my brother off.
Go ahead.
Because of his grace. I love Ramses. He said that those skirmishes were probably... Yes, I paused on purpose. The mic did not cut off. Those skirmishes were probably started or instigated by the police.
Yeah.
There's video, people. We don't have to use probable, right? I guess we have to, you know, what do they say in court? Allegedly, even when they have video.
The video, it's funny.
So yeah, I'm going to say those skirmishes, were allegedly started by the police and their dogs and fire hoses and billy clubs and
So while he was alive, folks like to challenge that narrative that he was a peaceful, benevolent leader type of individual. Hence his 20% approval rating among white Americans, and critically, his 20% approval rating among Black Americans, right? So stereotypes can affect Black people as well, okay? Now, of course, we know the end of that story. Dr. King is, as you mentioned, Q, celebrated for his nonviolent approach to changing at least that time in American history for the better for marginalized people, right? But it wasn't until after his death that the government took it seriously and actually changed some, I think what might have been, it wasn't Nixon, what's his name? I can't think of his name. Anyway, one of the presidents changed the laws after his death because there were so many eruptions around the country after that. So, protests. Dr. King said that a riot is the language of the unheard. Now, there are people that push back and say, listen, you need to be patient. You guys need to be patient. These things move slowly. The wheels of society turn very slowly. This is a long road. I say that. I have occupied different space, but
yes, you do.
Yeah, I occupy a different space, but I can say that because I'm indeed marching on that road. Someone else in a position of power cannot say that to me because they don't get to define what justice should be like or how long it should take. And I want to quote James Baldwin. Actually, do me a favor. You can read the James Baldwin quote because I know you love this one.
I might get this quote tattooed because I do love it. And it is a quote that Ramses is laughing as he says he knows I love it because Ramses encourages me and reminds me that this progress is slow and that we should be patient and one step at a time and yada, yada, yada. And this incremental approach to this progress that could overnight by way of legislation just be changed is insulting to me. James Baldwin said, and I quote, "It has taken my father's time, my mother's time, my uncle's time, my brother's time, and my sister's time, my nieces and nephews' time. How much time do you want for your progress?"
Ooh, wee.
Right? The multiple lifetimes of our ancestors. We've already given that time. You've already taken that time. In what world do we get where we're going? Do I pass away knowing or having some type of understanding that for my grandchildren, things will be different, that things will be better? That's still a question.
I think I'm going to add to it that you're saying that it is possible for things to change overnight. So I think that statement in and of itself suggests, more than suggests, that it is very possible to make huge sweeping changes, not just in terms of laws, but in terms of public opinion and how we interact with each other over the course of a lifetime, to where a person could see the world is in a much better place than it was when we started.
Hence my frustration.
So I'm with you. So watch this. Now, we talked about protesting because often enough, protesting is the language that we have that has been relatively consistent in terms of our plight, in terms of our arsenal toward achieving a more equitable America. Let me say what I'm going to say. Watch this. When we want to vote, sometimes that's taken away from us. I countless Black men permanently disenfranchised because they're convicted felons. We could talk about that. That is almost grotesquely unfair but permanently disenfranchised. We can talk about access to voting. We can talk about gerrymandering, weakening the strength of a Black person's vote, which weakens the value of the Black person's experience in terms of input to the relative to the overall American experience, right? And so protesting is kind of that last vestige, that last tool that many people feel like they have. And for that to then be villainized and conflated with rioting is exceptionally unfair. And it's based on stereotypes that I do want to challenge. Now, I want you to jump in right here, but I got some examples that will help me challenge this idea of what a protest is. Go ahead, Q.
I guess my problem is more with the idea that protesting is somehow still a vehicle for us. I don't think it is. Now, we do it kind of out of a duty. There's no outcome. We don't leave City Hall after our protest and then they text us like, okay, you guys came out, we heard you. We're gonna, like, no, that doesn't happen, right? So it's more a symbol of solidarity and a way for us to air our grievances and our frustrations amongst each other. The lawmakers and the policymakers, they don't come out to these protests, listen to our plight, hear our points, take that back to their body and make changes based on that anymore. And once upon a time, I think the idea of a protest was so scary, right? There would be, in some cases, like boycotts and strikes, there are fiscal damages that happen. People lose money and they respond to that. But us just showing up in mass upset does not tend to really move the needle like it once did.
Now, I'm not going to disagree with you, but I can't wholly agree with you there. I think that there may still be some value, but critically, if you have no other form of representation in terms of the government, then showing up with your person and the sign is not nothing. No, sitting at home is nothing.
Be clear. I did not say it was nothing.
Right.
And I also did not say it didn't have value.
Yeah.
It is just not the vehicle that it once was.
Sure. Okay.
And that's we can quantify that.
Yeah. I want to make sure that, because I like I said, I'm not going to disagree with you, but I want to make sure that we say that for our listeners.
It has qualitative value, okay, not quantitative.
Now, here's what I want to do. For folks that take issue with riots, first off, earlier we were talking about, shopping while Black, right? And how stereotypes work. The stereotypes that Black people steal, right? But the truth is that other people steal from Black people. Culture, of course. Liberty, as I mentioned, right to vote, access to, representation, etc. Wealth. This country's story is littered with massacres and riots and legislation and so forth. Terrorism, Black codes, Jim Crow, redlining, the GI Bill, etc. of stealing wealth from Black people. Stealing.
Very
right?
Intentionally, too, not just happenstance.
Hold on.
We weren't collateral damage. We were the target.
Yeah, to take from us,
yes.
Right? Life. Stealing life from us. We talk about Black life being snuffed out all the time, and people getting away with it with no consequences.
Creation, intellectual property.
But even if it's not,
can go on.
Even if we're not talking about murder, we just talked about the prison industrial complex. People get sentenced unfairly in this country. It's stealing life. Okay. Now, Black people have the stereotype, but I don't think that that's entirely fair. I'm going to make another point here. Black people have a stereotype of being aggressive rioters when we're protesting. So I'm going to read some stuff about riots for sports teams around the country that celebrated, or I guess rioted, after the
as
sports
a form of celebration,
right, or of loss. I'm gonna just read these just so you know, and I want you to ask yourself, why is there no stereotype that these people riot, but why is there a stereotype to Black people? I'm gonna read. Denver Nuggets, obviously they won the national championship recently. This was a couple weeks ago, maybe. 2 hours later, thousands went to McGregor Square and destroyed it. In Boston in 2004, 2007, and 2013, the Red Sox was the baseball team. Everybody got out there and rioted all 3 of those years. Boston. Okay. Detroit, 1984. Detroit has a team called Tigers. They probably play some cool sport. And then
The Detroit Tigers are a baseball team.
Boom. That's what I was on. All right. And then 1990, the Detroit Pistons. That's a basketball team. I know them. In 2011, the Vancouver Canucks lost the 2011 Stanley Cup to the Boston Bruins, and fans trashed parts of the city, causing millions of dollars in damage. Philadelphia Eagles, they riot all the time in Philly. Chicago in 1991 through 93, that was basketball. Denver in 96, the Avalanche is a hockey team. 98, the Broncos. 99, 2001, the Avalanche hockey team again. And in Cleveland in 1974, baseball team. All right. Sit with it.